Hello, my loves. Welcome back to AMA Friday, powered by Interior Creature. My name is Jaclyn Michelle. I am so excited to get into our first question of 2023, which is actually two questions. So, up on my Instagram page and in my newsletter, I've been sharing weekly human design horoscopes that track the transits for the week. And so these questions have to do with the transits. So, the first question that came into my inbox is, how do the transits in human design and the gene keys relate to astrology, or is it something entirely different? And the second question is, I've seen your weekly human design horoscope post on Instagram, but I haven't had a chance to dig into transits yet. Can you explain how they work? How do they impact my chart? So before I go ahead and answer these questions, I did want to kind of direct you to my Instagram and to my free newsletter. So every Monday morning on Instagram, I post something called This Week in the Cosmos, where I walk you through all the major solar transits and any kind of big transits of note that are happening during the week. And if you don't want to wait till Monday morning, you can subscribe to my free newsletter, which goes out Sunday evening. And there's longer human design horoscopes talking you through all the major transits that are going down. I love creating them. I hope you love reading them. So anyway, that's where to get kind of more consistent information about what's going on in the sky from week to week. Back to the topic at hand, what are transits? In astrology and in human design in the gene keys, a transit describes the current position and the movement of a planet as it orbits around the sun. During the course of that planet's journey around the sun, it's actually going to pass through each of the 12 zodiac signs. And how long it spends in each sign, and it's the time it really takes the entire journey to happen, is going to depend on the size of the planet and the distance that planet is from the sun. So let's start with the sun itself. We know the sun takes 365 days to illuminate each of the 12 signs of the zodiac, right? That's why everyone born between, a certain date and a certain date is a Pisces every year. That doesn't change, right? The moon is orbiting us, and we're orbiting around the sun. And we know from looking at the lunar cycles, like the moon moving from new to waxing to full to waning back to new again, that cycle takes about 28 days. It takes about 28 days for the moon then to cycle through all 12 signs of the zodiac. Now, let's look at the inner planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars. Their orbits are relatively short. Mercury makes its way around the sun every 88 days, Venus every 225 days, Mars every 687 days. And as we move further out to some of these bigger planets that are farther out in the solar system, that orbit time takes a little bit longer. So the nodes of the moon, the north node and the south node, actually take 18 years, 7 months, and I believe 9 days to make their way through that complete zodiacal wheel. So they're going to change signs every year and a half. Now, Jupiter and Saturn, those outer planets, take 12 years and 29 years to make their way around the sun, respectively. And the asteroid Chiron takes about 50 years to make its way around the sun. So most of us aren't going to experience more than one Chiron return, or even more than one Uranus return. So Uranus, it takes 84 years for Uranus to make its way one complete orbit through all 12 signs of the zodiac. Neptune every 165 years, and Pluto every 248 years. If you've ever heard the term natal return, this basically refers to when a planet in your astrological natal chart returns to the same place that it was, the same zodiac sign and the same degree, where it was at that exact moment that you were born. So in my natal chart, for example, my Mercury sits in Pisces at 11.7 degrees. So that translates in human design to gate 63. So every 88 days, Mercury is moving, remember, in its orbit around the sun. It's going to take about 88 days for it to go from gate 63 through the zodiacal wheel all the way back around to occupy gate 63 a second time. In human design and in the gene keys, and we're using the terms gate and gene key kind of interchangeably here, each gate corresponds to a specific range of degrees within a zodiac sign. So for example, gate 63 is governed by Pisces, and it kind of covers 11 degrees, 22 minutes, 30 seconds through 17 degrees of Pisces. So anybody who has a planetary placement within that range of degrees is going to have a gate 63 activation in their human design chart. Now, this range gets even further subdivided across the 6 lines. So, for example, my natal Mercury, like I said, is at 11 degrees, 11.7 degrees in Pisces. That translates to gate 63 on line 1. One of the 4 systems that informs human design is the I Ching or the I Ching. So I've heard it pronounced both ways. So basically what happens is when you run your human design chart, it's taking your natal placements and doing 2 things. It's taking your natal placements and it's translating them into the language of the I Ching. So each hexagram from the I Ching corresponds to a gate or a gene key. So if you were looking at, say, hexagram 1, that's going to correlate to gate 1 or gene key 1. And each gate is governed by a zodiac sign. And each zodiac sign actually governs a cluster of gates/gene keys, right? So Pisces, you can see on the screen, rules gates 55, 37, 63, 22, 36, and line 1 and part of line 2 of gate 25. And then the rest of line 2 and lines 3 through 6 of gate 25 are actually ruled by Aries. The second thing happens when you run a human design chart is it calculates your natal your gestational chart, right? That chart that would be, I guess, like the astrological coordinates for what was going on in the sky roughly 88 days prior to when you were born. And then it takes that information from that gestational chart and translates it also into the language of the I Ching. So that's the 1,000-foot view of what transits are. Let's answer the second part of the question now. How do I work with the energy of those transits? So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to give you that information at Interior Creature on Instagram and also in my free newsletter every week. Richard Rudd of the Gene Keys also has a free email list, and he illuminates the solar transits. So every 5 or 6 days, an email pops in my inbox that just reminds me, like, hey, tomorrow the sun is moving into this gene key. And then 5 or 6 days later, the sun is now moving into this gene key. And he has like a little meditation on what that could mean, right? But if you really want to get nitty gritty and like know the exact celestial weather for every kind of planet and where it is at the moment and how it's impacting your chart, on mybodygraph.com, there's an element that you can purchase called the transit tool. I believe it's like $80, but basically you have it, you buy it once, you have it forever, and you can run transit charts for dates in the future, dates in the past, to get exactly kind of a snapshot of how the planets are impacting you. And over the next couple slides, you're going to see screenshots of what those charts look like. So whether I'm looking at my own chart or one of my clients' charts, here are some of the key dates I look for when I'm doing transit work. The first one is I look for dates when a planet is transiting the same gate it activated in the natal chart, so natal returns. So that I like to think of as almost like home field advantage. So every 88 days or so, like we talked about, Pisces is, Mercury is going to move back into Pisces, and it's going to activate gate 63. Gate 63 is my natal placement, right? So it's almost like I have home field advantage with that energy. It's energy I'm used to. It's energy I've worked with before. So it's either going to be an opportunity for me to kind of live out some of the compassion, love frequencies of that gate's energy that I've been working on, or it might be an opportunity to practice kind of shifting from some of those fear frequencies into some of those more compassion and love frequencies, right? So, but it is energy that should feel familiar. I also want to look for dates when any planet is moving into one of my activated gates. And these are opportunities for a fresh and new perspective. So let's think about gate 63. So again, that's my natal Mercury. If Venus transits gate 63, that's an opportunity. Instead of working with gate 63 through the lens of communication and intellect, I can then work with gate 63's energy, but through the lens of interpersonal relationships and beauty and aesthetics and values. So it's basically looking at that same energy, but through a different lens, through a different perspective. And then finally, I also want to look for dates when any planet is giving me access to new energy. So for example, I have gate 14 activated in my chart. Anytime any planet activates gate 2, I get access to the channel of the beat. Now, that's not something I normally have. I normally have gate 14's like really excited energy to like, ooh, this is what I'm excited by. Ooh, this is something I have energy to, but I don't always know where to aim it because gate 2 is that gate that gives us that direction. It's reaching down from the self center toward the sacral. So when I get temporary access to that gate's energy, it's like all of a sudden I have this inner knowing and I can aim that physical energy from gate 14 in a better direction, right? And so you having a new access to a channel you don't normally have access to doesn't change your strategy, doesn't change your authority, but it can give you energy to play with, to kind of swim and to experiment with. Similarly, sometimes you're going to have a planet that's activating a gate that actually closes a center for you. Like in my chart, for example, my self center is open. So when gate 2, like we just talked about, gets activated, it actually closes my self center for me temporarily. Now, that doesn't mean, again, I'm using myself to make any sort of decisions. It's not replacing my strategy and my authority, but I do have a bit more clarity when I'm alone about what feels like me, what doesn't, what I identify with, what I don't. So let's look at each one of these a little bit more in depth. So I want to show you what each of these looks like on the transit software. So if you decide to get into the nitty gritty, you know what you're looking for. So first, natal returns. Natal returns, again, remember it's that same planet activating that same gate on that same line from that moment of your birth. A really easy way to look at this is to look at your birthday, for example. So March 13th, 2023, I ran a chart for that date. It is unsurprising that the sun and the earth are activating the exact same gates on the exact same lines that they do in my natal chart, right? The sun on gate 36 in line 1, the earth in gate 6 in line 1. So that's kind of amplifying, turning up the volume on that energy. It's energy I'm used to. It's kind of present in that natal chart. That's that home field advantage we talked about. Next thing I want to look for is when gates are transited that give me access to centers, that actually close centers that I normally have open in my chart. Now, this happens to me a lot because I have a ton of open centers in my chart. I ran a transit chart earlier today, just in the middle of the afternoon, to see what the cosmic weather was. And you're going to notice from my natal chart on the left to the transit chart on the right, I have a lot more centers to find than I normally do. So that channel of awareness got activated, and I'll talk about that in a minute. That defined my head and my mind center. I haven't lost my keys yet today, which is normally something that happens with just my head center typically being open. So with the head and the mind center, again, it's giving me temporary access to all the qualities and traits of more consistency in that energy. It's not changing my strategy. It's not changing my authority. It's just energy I get to kind of experiment with and swim in for a little while. Now, it's a little bit different when you get to longer term transits. So gate 2, which we're going to talk about in a second, is being transited currently by Uranus, and it's been transited by Uranus for quite some time. Like Uranus has been sitting in gate 2 for a while. And gate 2, not only is it giving me access to a channel, which we'll talk about in a minute, that I don't normally have access to, it's defining my self-center. So even though this isn't changing my strategy or my authority, I have felt a lot more clarity during the time frame of this transit as to what feels in alignment and what doesn't, what feels quote unquote on brand and what doesn't. And normally that's a little bit more amorphous for me. That's a little bit kind of, because I have that open self center in my natal chart, right? So it's been interesting to kind of experiment with this energy to kind of get clarity where I can, when I can, because I know it's not something that's going to exist kind of permanently. So I've been taking advantage of that and creating a lot of content and putting a lot of, projects together while I have this clarity, right? And then you'll notice the last center I have activated I don't normally is that solar plexus, right? Does not change my authority. It doesn't turn me into an emotional decision maker, but it has been interesting being a little bit more aware of my emotions and my feelings than maybe I otherwise would be. And it's a shorter term transit because the gates that are being activated that are giving me access to that energy have a shorter duration kind of in their transit window, which finally brings us to new and temporary channels that we have activated because of transits. So again, if we look at my closed head and my mind, that was brought to us by the sun sitting in gate 61, and it sounds like Sesame Street, brought to you by the letter N. No, it's the sun sitting in gate 61 and the north node sitting in gate 24. So those are, at least the north node's a bit of a longer transit, but the sun's only going to sit in gate 61 for the next 3 or 4 days. So again, this definition I'm experiencing is kind of a, short term, maybe 46 to or 48 to 72 hours more of that energy. It's not going to change the way that I operate, make decisions, but it's, again, interesting to experiment with it while it's here. That said, that channel of the beat, as I mentioned, you'll notice on the screen Uranus, and then that column in green shows you what the planets are doing literally right now, and in blue is my natal placements, right? I probably should have explained that before. But you'll notice in green, Uranus right now is sitting in gate 2. And again, like I mentioned, it's been there for a while. So my self-center not only has been temporarily defined for a while, but I've had access to the channel of the beat. And I think I mentioned this earlier in the video. Gate 14 is your sacral, yes, but it's super powerful, and it's this really intensive physical energy to create, to generate, to build. And gate 2 gives it direction. And that's the thing sometimes I feel a little bit lost with when this gate isn't being transited, right? It's I have all this physical energy. I have all this creative power. I don't know where to aim it. And it's been really exciting during the duration of this transit to have that clarity of ooh, this is what I want to build. This is what I want to offer. This is the direction I want to push it in. So it's been great for just kind of professionally how what I've been building for Interior Creature. And then finally, we've got that channel of synthesis in my chart temporarily. Now, again, it's not going to make me an emotional generator. It's not going to, change my strategy for decision making, but I have felt a little bit more tapped into my emotions over the past, duration of this transit. So it's an interesting energy to swim in, not going to change the way that I work. So I'm guessing there are two types of folks watching this video. Either folks who are like on my body graph now, buying that transit tool, running all the charts, figuring out all the things. That's kind of category one. And category two is looking at their screen going, wow, this is really valuable information, but oh my gosh, I'm a little overwhelmed. Like, I don't even know where to start. Don't worry, I got you. I am definitely in that first category. This is my special, happy, nerdy place. I love doing personal energetic forecast readings for folks. So information about how to book one of those is in the description box below. But basically what happens is you book a reading, you send me your birth date, time, and place, and I run a 12-month projection of your chart. I'll let you know the dates if you're having any big natal returns, any dates, any planets are transiting any of your activated gates. We'll look for times of the year where you've got centers defined that you don't normally have, or channels activated you don't normally have. I can put it together in a beautiful, nerdy, sortable spreadsheet for you and kind of walk you through your personal cosmic weather forecast for the year. So again, information about that is in the description box below. So that is it for this week for AMA Friday. If you have a question for me about human design, the gene keys, astrology, I would love to hear from you. My email is interiorcreature@gmail.com, or you can DM me on Instagram @interiorcreature, or even drop your question in the comments below. Until next time, have an amazing week.